brothers and sisters. We are going to continue with part 2 of our video on unmasking the Whore of Babylon. In our last video, we proved that there is no entity that exists today other than the United States of America that has all 30 plus marks of the Great Whore of Babylon. The only 2 points we did not get into is the presence of idols in the United States, nor did we discuss witchcraft. So we will continue where we left off, once again due to the sheer volume of information that was necessary to research for these videos. I'm going to move along fairly quickly. If you want to read any article, just hit pause on the video and read the information. So where we left off. Truth of the matter is the United States is not a Christian nation. It never has been. Although there are some Christians that live there, just like pagan Rome, the very atmosphere is contaminated with sin and paganism. The early church fathers were correct in stating that ancient pagan Rome was the Whore of Babylon. For in fact, pagan Rome had all of the marks at that time. Now we know it's not the whore spoken of in Revelation because it did not receive the prophesied punishments. Now it may surprise you to know that the United States was built in imitation of pagan Rome and its founding fathers were anything but Christian. Okay, here is an excerpt from a historical document. This was actually from the Treaty of Peace and Friendship between the United States and the Bay and subjects of Tripoli of Barbary, Article 11. I've enclosed a picture. Quote, one important U.S. document that not many people are aware of is the Treaty of Peace and Friendship between the United States and the Bay and subjects of Tripoli of Barbary. Article 11 of this treaty, which was started in the administration of George Washington and which was ratified in the administration of John Adams, reads, quote, as the government of the United States is not in any sense founded on the Christian religion, end quote. The rest of the text is below, as can be seen by the image of it below. This makes it very clear that America was not founded as a Christian nation or on Judeo-Christian principles. I have a quote here from Thomas Jefferson, a letter of Thomas Jefferson to Dr. Benjamin Rush in September 23, 1800. The clergy believe that any portion of power confided to me as president will be exerted in opposition to their schemes, and they believe rightly. I have sworn upon the altar of God eternal hostility against every form of tyranny over the mind of men. So once again, he is referencing the church. He believes the church is tyranny over the minds of men. Okay, let's continue. This is from James Madison, 1785. What influence, in fact, have ecclesiastical establishments had on society? In some instances, they have been seen to erect a spiritual tyranny on the ruins of the civil authority. On many instances, they have seen upholding the thrones of political tyranny. In no instance have they been the guardians of the liberties of the people. Rulers who wish to subvert the public liberty may have found and established clergy convenient auxiliaries, but a just government instituted to secure and perpetuate needs them not. So once again, James Madison believes that a just government has no use and has no need for any type of ecclesiastical establishment or influence of ecclesiastical establishment. The founding fathers were in fact deists, not Christians. So here we have submitted the proof of this. I have a couple quotes here. One of those employed deistic principles was Benjamin Franklin. As a young man in Philadelphia, he read some Christian books that were in opposition to deism. Franklin wrote in his autobiography, some books against deism fell into my hands. They are said to be the substance of sermons preached at Boyle's lectures. It happened that they wrought an effect on me quite contrary to what was intended by them. For the arguments of the deists, which were quoted to be refuted, appeared to me much stronger than the refutations. In short, I soon became a thorough deist. Okay, those are the words of Benjamin Franklin. He became a deist, not Christian. Okay, this is a letter from Jefferson to Benjamin Rush in 1803, dated April 21st. To the corruptions of Christianity, I am indeed opposed, but not to the genuine precepts of Jesus himself. I'm a Christian in the only sense in which he wished anyone to be, that is sincerely attached to his doctrines in preference to all others, ascribing to himself every human excellence and believing he never claimed any other. So what Jefferson is saying is he believed that Jesus was not God, that he was just full of human excellence, and he didn't want anyone else to believe otherwise. Okay, that's not Christian. All right, here we go. This next one is in reference to Washington. In the book Washington and Religion by Paul F. Buller Jr., we read on page 82. Buller includes a quote from a presbyter and minister, Arthur Bradford. Bradford wrote that Green, quote, often said in my hearing, though very sorrowfully, of course, that while Washington was very deferential to religion in his ceremonies, like nearly all the founders of the Republic, he was not a Christian, but a deist. Now, brothers and sisters, the reason this is important to understand is because deism denies God's law and his supremacy and sets man up as the sole author of virtue and morality. As such, the founding fathers were fascinated by pagan Rome, who deified the virtues that they held in esteem. However, as we have mentioned earlier, here we have Cardinal Gibbons from the book Faith of Our Fathers. The penetration of the religion of Babylon became so general and well known that Rome was called the New Babylon. So, we know that ancient Rome was known as New Babylon, the Whore of Babylon, and we know the founding fathers of America based this new republic, its governmental system, its beliefs, its ideology, on pagan Rome. Ergo, we have New Babylon. Let's continue. According to historian Carl J. Richard, in Greeks and Romans Bearing Gifts, How the Ancients Inspired the Founding Fathers, the early Roman Republic heavily influenced the founders of America, who shared many common fears and hopes of the earlier architects of that republic. As a consequence of its influence with the founders, Roman symbolism is rampant in American society. The eagle is the symbol of both, and Latin inscriptions can be found on all 13 original state seals, as well as the Great Seal of the United States. Roman sayings and symbols are on American currency. Early American coins had the head of a Roman on one side because the founders did not want to have a king on their coins. The Latin saying, Annuit Ceptis, he approves of the undertaking, and Novus Ordo Seclorum, a new order of the ages, are above and below the unfinished pyramid on the $1 bill. Okay, I'm going to quote, revolutionary writers and orators frequently made parallels between Rome and America. Josiah Quincy compared the tyrant Caesar to King George, asking, is not Britain to America what Caesar was to Rome? One of the most dramatic and obvious examples is Joseph Warren's oration on the Boston Massacre in 1775, during which he wore a Roman toga. Cicero, famous writer, ancient Rome. Cicero's works were frequently quoted by the founders, as well as in various contemporary orations, pamphlets, and sermons. John Quincy Adams said Cicero's works were as essential as his limbs. Thomas Jefferson listed Cicero as one of his major influences in drafting the Declaration of Independence. We see this point even more clearly. In a tribute to Zeus, we see George Washington arraigned as, quote, Zeus the lawgiver, according to the creator of the statue, Horatio Greeno, who built the statue in 1840. Here we have a picture. George Washington seated as Zeus, You can compare that to actual statues of Zeus. You can see they are identical. That was the point. The semi-nude Washington, as expected, shocked many Americans. Quote, when Greenough carved his large statue of George Washington in the national Capitol, he omitted the drapery on the upper part of the body, obviously with the intention of drawing the attention of the spectator away from the dress to the person who wore it. He clearly followed in this respect the practices of the Greeks, and more especially the pattern set by Phidias in his colossal Zeus in Olympia. The Greeks might omit the drapery with impunity, for there was a race intensely fond of the nude. Greenough, imitating them, in the face of very pronounced racial and religious prejudices against the nude, committed the unpardonable mistake of copying not the spirit of the past art, but its accidental expression. Instead of accomplishing his end, therefore, by omitting the drapery, he achieved the opposite, for the drapery is conspicuous by its very absence. That was by Edmund von Mock, expert in Greek sculpture. All right, Nathaniel Hawthorne. He is the one that actually wrote an article on the statue in A Trip to Washington. Did anybody ever see Washington naked? It is inconceivable. He had no nakedness, but I imagine was born with his clothes on and his hair powdered, and made his stately bow on his first appearance in the world. Now, Greenough's sculpture is enriched with symbols. Washington's figure is modeled on the classic statuary of ancient Greece, seat of the world's first democracy. So he represents Zeus, and of course is titled as such. And carvings on the sides depict the Greek god Apollo. Now let's compare this to Isaiah. Baal, another name for Zeus, is broken. Nebo, another name for Apollo, is destroyed. Their idols are put upon beasts and cattle, your burdens of heavy weight, even unto weariness. So Isaiah specifically talks about the two false gods, Zeus and Apollo, together. Here we have Zeus and Apollo in one piece. Okay, and he is an idol. He is raised to a god status, and we're going to go more on that later. Okay, let's take a look at the Capitol. Now, the Capitol was actually named the Temple of Liberty. It was designed as a temple to the Roman goddess Libertas. So, who was this Libertas that enamored the founding fathers enough to dedicate the entire country to her and symbolize what America stands for? Lady Liberty, Goddess Libertas, signified freedom of action, freedom from restraint, independence, rights, and related forms of personal and social liberty. The 7 rays on Liberty's crown represent the 7 continents and 7 seas. How do the occult view Lady Liberty? Well, from the book Devotions for the Witch, which is an actual Wiccan book. April 13th, Libertas, the Roman goddess of freedom, including the freedom to do whatever feels good. Sexual freedom and freedom from slavery is honored. Now, let's compare this to Satanism. Once again, Libertas is the goddess of freedom, including the freedom to do whatever feels good. Okay, Aleister Crowley, Father Modern Satanism. Famous for this quote, "Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law." That is the entire law of Satanism. Do what thou wilt. In their words, the Church of Satan is a religious group that encourages people to accept their human nature and build their ego, as it is told in the Satanic Bible, written in 1969 by Anton LaVey. They do not worship or believe in Satan. They do not believe in God. Satan is just a symbol of freedom and the ego. So the first thing we have here in the United States is a symbol of ego, George Washington being raised up to God status, and Libertas, the symbol of freedom to do what thou wilt. Nothing illustrates this more than the painting of George Washington in the center of the Capitol building as God, with the goddess Libertas seated at his right hand and surrounded by other pagan deities that are learning from them. Here we have a picture of the Capitol, top of the Capitol, the apotheosis of Washington in the Capitol dome. You'll notice that not only is he surrounded by angels, but these are not the Christian angels. What we actually have here is Lady Libertas, or shall we say Whore Libertas, on his right-hand side, and all the pagan gods and goddesses below and beneath. Now, this idea of Godhead of George Washington makes more sense. Let's take a look at it even further. The unofficial national anthem up until the year 1931 was called Hail Columbia. Columbia was the personification of the pagan goddess Libertas. She is the same woman in Hollywood that is holding that torch in Columbia Pictures. That is Columbia, personification of the goddess Libertas, which is illuminating the world with this freedom to do as thou wilt. Now, in this national anthem, titled Hail Columbia, it sings of Washington's, quote, godlike power, unquote, and calls him the, quote, rock on which storms break. Now, compare this to ancient Rome. In ancient Rome, Zeus was the protector of Libertas. This was not lost in George Washington. But if Libertas is the goddess of freedom, do whatever you will, and sexual freedom, who was Zeus? We're going to talk about that later. Who exactly was Libertas? Well, according to the early church father, St. Augustine, in his book 7, chapter 26, by that time, the cult of Libertas, introduced by Clodius, who had become so prominent in Rome that during the 4th century, St. Augustine was able to refer to Libertas as the great mother of whores who turned men into effeminate votaries. Concerning the effeminates consecrated to the same great mother, in defiance of all the modesty which belongs to men and women, these effeminates, no later than yesterday, were going through the streets and places of Carthage with anointed hair, whitened faces, relaxed bodies, and feminine gait, exacting from the people the means of maintaining their ignominious lives. The great mother has surpassed all of her sons, not in greatness of deity, but of crime. To this monster, not even the monstrosity of Janus is to be compared. His deformity was only in his image. Janus had 2 faces. Hers was the deformity of cruelty in her sacred rites. He has a redundancy of members in stone images. She inflicts the loss of members on men. So, in the words of St. Augustine, the cult of Libertas said she was the great mother of whores. There you have it. The pagan goddess Libertas was the great mother of whores, according to St. Augustine. And of course, this paragraph was talking specifically about homosexuality and transsexuality, which of course right now is prominent again in America. How appropriate. Let's continue. Again, this time from scholars of pagan gods. So this time I'm going to quote from a scholar who only studies pagan gods and goddesses. Let's see what they have to say about Lady Libertas, or goddess Libertas. Libertas is associated with all freedom, including sexual freedom. Quote, Cupid-inspired desire. The imported god Priapus represented gross or humorous lust. Mutinous Tutinus promoted marital sex. The god Liber, understood as the free one, oversaw physiological responses during sexual intercourse. When a male assumed the toga virilis, or toga of manhood, Liber became his patron. According to the love poets, he left behind the innocent modesty, pudor of childhood, and acquired the sexual freedom, Libertas, to begin his course of love. Host of deities oversaw every aspect of intercourse, conception, and childbirth. This is from Robert Turkin, Gods of Ancient Rome. So once again, we have both a pagan, a studier of gods and goddesses, and we have a Catholic Church father, both saying the same thing. Lady Libertas was the great whore, the representation, personification of sexual freedom. And of course, we have modern day witchcraft that honors her as the goddess of freedom to do whatever you will and sexual freedom. Ergo, the great whore is represented by Libertas. Here we have a statue in the Temple of Liberty, or Libertas, smack dab in the Capitol Dome. You will notice that this statue or idol of later Libertas, because that's what it is. Here in America, people adore the concept of liberty completely without regard to God's law. They are more concerned with personal freedom to commit abortion, to be homosexual, prostitution, fornication, pornography, do whatever they want. This is what is adored in America. Freedom to do as you will. And of course, sexual freedom. So we have a statue of the false goddess Libertas, smack dab in the Capitol Dome. If we look above it, on top, we see the Roman Pantheon with its classical columns, portico, and pediment, which was the model for the Capitol's original dome and rotunda. Also circular, just as ancient Babylon. We can also see other pagan gods around Washington, D.C., including Court of Neptune by the Library of Congress. This is the god of the sea, patron of... He is the god of merchants on the sea. He is sometimes compared to the devil because of his pitchfork. So in many ways, he is the false god of commerce, or mammon, something else that the United States idolizes. This brings us to our next pagan goddess that is adored by America. Athena, or in a Roman name, Minerva. Next to Zeus and Libertas, Minerva was the next most venerated. Minerva represents independence, man's own wisdom, and victory in war. Her symbol is the owl, which today is honored in Bohemian Grove every year with occult rituals by the country's elite. You notice there are statues to Athena of peace and Athena of war. Let's contrast this to the scriptures, which says God's wisdom is not the wisdom's wisdom. The world's wisdom is foolishness to God, and God's wisdom is foolishness to the world. So America worships man's own wisdom. We see this in glorification of technology and man's pride and arrogance, that he believes that he knows better than God's law, what the church tells us, and everything that we have received from on high. Let's continue. The Lincoln Memorial, modeled after the Parthenon in Athens. Once again, this was not built by the fathers, but as you can see, it follows the same guideline. The main purpose of the Parthenon in Athens was a temple for Athena, or Minerva, virgin goddess and patron of Athens. It represented both the dominance of Athens, once again, the ego, and democracy, man's wisdom, rule by man, as opposed to rule by a monarchy under God, which were both traits sought after by the founding fathers. Let's take a look at the Supreme Court. The use of U.S. Supreme Court building, once again, replica of pagan temples. Many people say, hey, look, you got Moses and the 10 Commandments. See, it's Christian nation. Sorry, not the case. According to the office of the curator at the court, the east wall frieze is located directly above the bench and focuses on 2 male figures that represent the majesty of law and the power of government. According to a letter from Weinman to Gilbert, the tablet between them symbolizes the first 10 amendments to the Constitution, also known as the Bill of Rights. The allegorical figures standing on either side of the central figure symbolize wisdom, man's wisdom, on the left, and justice, man's justice, on the right. Weinman described the figures grouped on the right side as the safeguarded liberties and the rights of the people in their pursuit of happiness, and those on the left side as the defense of human rights and protection of innocence. Note, man's rights, not God's law, govern this court. Those that claim that there is a depiction of Moses forget that there is also one of Muhammad in the Supreme Court. Here we have the depiction of Muhammad along with the rest of them. Moving on. The verses in Scripture talk about the Whore of Babylon practicing astrology. Thou hast failed in the multitude or thy counsels. Let now the astrologers stand and save thee. They that gazed at the stars counted the months. That from them they might tell the things that shall come to thee. Isaiah 47:13. Here we have a picture also of paintings. We actually have an entire hall of astrology in the Capitol. According to Kenneth McGee, an Arlington, Virginia astrologer who lectures on the subject, suggests there are 30 zodiacs, with 12 of these located in the Library of Congress building alone. I'm sorry, they are actually located in the Library of Congress, not in the Capitol, although you will find the zodiac in the Capitol building as well. Quote, the city itself was planned by George Washington. He's referencing Washington, D.C. The city itself was planned by George Washington, was initially surveyed using stars as guides. The nation's first president was also leader of a Masonic lodge, and Thomas Jefferson, Ben Franklin, and many of the nation's other founding fathers were part of the Freemason movement. In this era, Masonic elders used astrology to time the laying of foundation or cornerstones for every significant new structure rising in the district, including the White House and Capitol building, he points out. Quote, the city's birth chart has a lineup of planets, including the sun, all clustered in that section of the horoscope astrologers identify with mysteries and the occult, which fits with all the secret symbols found in the city today. Okay, I'm going to quote again from someone else. As Roman astrologers linked the foundation of their city with a fixed star in Leo called Regulus, the same star was adopted by the founding fathers as one of the three pre-prime marking stars. American Freemasons played the primary role in planning, designing, constructing, and dedicating the city of Washington. What is best described by Dr. Bob Hieronymus, author of the United Symbolism of America, as the annual solar mystery, is best experienced on August 10th and 12th from the steps of the west front of the Capitol building. The sun sets directly over the horizon. Then the three primary stars glow above the White House. They are Spica, Arcturus, and Regulus, forming a triangle that reflects exactly in the shape of the Federal Triangle. The 3 points are the White House, the Capitol, and the obelisk that is the Washington Monument. This brings us to the Statue of Liberty, which is decidedly not Libertas, carried by only one goddess of occult illumination. This goddess is called Hecate. This Hecate, goddess of witchcraft, is usually pictured with 2 torches. Wiccans honor Hecate as their prime deity and their patron. So we have the Columbia, the Americanization of later Lady Liberty, which seems to blend the goddess Libertas, Minerva, and Hecate, patroness of light, illumination, and witchcraft. Compare this to the scriptures, which refers to harlotry, witchcraft, and arrogance. The law, which is carried by the Statue of Liberty, only has one thing: the date of her freedom, signifying the only law of America is freedom. She represents the enlightenment of the 7 continents of the earth. Those are the 7 points. With the secret knowledge of freedom to do as ye will. For a complete history, the building of Statue of Liberty, I'll go ahead and take a look at the slides I have here posted. Who built it? Who commissioned it? Donated from France. Once again, Masonics. In the words of the master of illumination, the angel of light, ye shall be like gods. And we all know who said that. The serpent in the Garden of Eden. Here we have a picture of Hecate and a picture of the head of Statue of Liberty. She was dedicated on October 28th, 1886 in a Masonic ceremony. Some religious conservatives at the time objected to a pagan goddess serving in such a role. One commentator, writing in the American Catholic Quarterly Review in 1880, volume 5, pages 587 to 97, decried the erection of this, quote, idol of a heathen goddess, holding her torch to proclaim that mankind receives true light not from Christ in Christianity, but from heathenism and its gods. So, brothers and sisters, if you think that it's a little far-fetched that America is Babylon, that is traced back to Babylon, let's take a look at the history of Babylon. And let's trace the United States back to Babylon, mother of all prostitutes, because that is who Babylon was, mother of all prostitutes. The United States being mystery Babylon, according to the scriptures, daughter of Babylon, meaning receiving her paganism and her ideology. So, 2 key figures in the origin of ancient Babylon are Nimrod, mentioned in the Bible, a great-grandson of Noah, and his mother and wife, Semiramis. Nimrod, known in Egypt as Osiris, was the founder of the first world empire at Babel, later known as Babylon. From ancient sources such as the Epic of Gilgamesh and records unearthed by archaeologists from long-ruined Mesopotamia and Egyptian cities, we can reconstruct subsequent events. After Nimrod's death, circa 2167 BC, Semiramis, this is the mother and wife of Nimrod, promoted the belief that he was a god. She claimed that she saw a full-grown evergreen tree springing out of the roots of a dead tree stump, symbolizing the springing forth of new life for Nimrod. A few years later, Semiramis bore a son, Horus, or Gilgamesh. She declared that she had been visited by the spirit of Nimrod, who left her pregnant with the boy. Horus, she maintained, was Nimrod reincarnated. So with a father, mother, and son deified, a deceptive, perverted trinity was formed. After their deaths, Nimrod and his wife, Semiramis, the ancient pagan, quote, queen of heaven, were confirmed by their priests as gods and given homage as Marduk and Astarte, also known as Ishtar, Isis, Aphrodite, or Venus, depending which civilization. It is important to understand that the Roman gods and goddesses that were venerated in ancient Rome and then later imported to the United States of America originated in Babylon. Hence, the term mother of all prostitution was both literal due to the temple cult of prostitution and spiritual in the case of ancient Babylon, since God views idolatry as prostitution. See, both the long gone pagan Rome and America honor Marduk, Lord of Babylon. Here we have Jeremiah 50. Here's what it says. Declare ye among the nations, publish it, lift up a standard, proclaim, conceal it not, say Babylon is taken, Bel is confounded, Marduk is overthrown, their graven things are confounded, their idols are overthrown. So who's Marduk? Well, below are some of the titles of this false god and demon, which were the deification of Nimrod, the first one who rebelled against God in the Bible, in Babylon. So we've got Marduk, founder and patron god of Babylon. In Enlil, he was referred to as Bel the Younger in Babylonian. Bel the Older in Enlil. In Akkadian, he's called Asarluhi, Bilulu. In Assyrian, he's called Urus, Urak, Antu, Merdaduk. In ancient Egyptian, he's called Ra, creator, the falcon-headed sun god. In Newer Egyptian, he's called Amun-Ra, known as the ram-headed god. In Roman, his name is Zeus. His name is Beelzebub. In Jewish, Bel or Baal. See, Marduk / Bel has a temple to Baal, temple of the sun, on the actual east portico of the White House. Quote, a print in Robert Wood's 1753 book, The Ruins of Palmyra, impressed Jefferson for the Capitol's new east portico design. The print was Wood's conception of the Temple of the Sun, which is also the temple of Bel, or Baal, the god of the sky and the sun. His name, Baal, literally means Lord. He is the father in the divine trinity of the sun god. Yaribibol, with the crown of the sun, was the messenger of the sun, and Agribol was of the moon. Here we have a picture of the east portico White House, which is the temple of the sun god. And we also have a picture of the Trinity, the Babylonian Trinity, with Palmyra, this divine triad, Baal, shaman, center, with the moon god Aglibabol on his right and sun god Yaribol at left, discovered at Beerweb near Palmyra. Obelisks. Recall the Masonic triangle. The obelisks, also found around Washington, D.C., are representative of the sun god Ra. Once again, Marduk, Zeus. Ares, the ram-headed god Amun, Amun-Ra, was also used as Marduk symbol in Egypt. A god with a goat head? Sound familiar? Recall the scripture passage that says the whore of Babylon has fornicated, in other words, adored the gods of Egypt. Here we have Ra. And the god of Babylon. Here we have Marduk. There are many other statues that I have not mentioned due to time constraints. More recently, the construction was just finished on the second largest statue in the United States. This is a statue to Venus, Ishtar, goddess of prostitution. Where is it in? Where else? San Francisco. 9 stories high. But you say, people don't worship them. People may not worship the statues, but they certainly worship the ideas of personal freedom, man's wisdom, rights, sexual freedom, occult practices, and arrogance, which is what these statues represent. Are these ideas placed above God and his law? Absolutely. Irrevocably, yes. So far we have shown the United States is based on pagan Rome, astrology, it has idols. Now we'll prove its permeation with witchcraft and the occult. It was formed on Freemasonry. Quote, one recent historical account of Freemasonry, the Temple and the Lodge, boasts instead of the profound influence of Freemasonry on the founding documents. On June 11th, Continental Congress appointed a committee to draft a Declaration of Independence. Of the 5 men on this committee, 2, Franklin and Robert Livingston, were Freemasons. 1, Robert Sherman, is believed, though not confirmed to have been. The other 2, Thomas Jefferson and John Adams, were not, despite subsequent claims to the contrary. The text of the Declaration was composed by Jefferson. It was submitted to Congress, accepted on July 4th, 1776. The 9 signatories, who can now be established as proven Freemasons, and the 10 who are possibly so, included such influential figures as Washington, Franklin, and of course, the President of the Congress, John Hancock. The Army, moreover, remained almost entirely in Freemasonic hands. As we shall see, it is in the Constitution the influence of Freemasonry is most discernible. At last, on May 25th, 1787, the Constitutional Convention opened in Philadelphia. The first voice to make itself heard in any significantly was Randolph, a member of a Williamsburg lodge, had become Washington's aide-de-camp. Subsequently, he has become Attorney General, Governor of Virginia, and Grand Master of Virginia's Grand Lodge. During Washington's presidency, he was to serve as the first Attorney General of the United States, then the first Secretary of State. There were ultimately 5 dominant and guiding spirits behind the Constitution: Washington, Franklin, Randolph, Jefferson, John Adams. Of these, the first 3 were active Freemasons, but they were men who took their Freemasonry extremely seriously. Men who subscribed fervently to its ideals, whose entire orientation had been shaped and conditioned by it. And Adams' position, though he himself is not known to have been a Freemason, was virtually identical to theirs. When he became president, moreover, he appointed a prominent Freemason, John Marshall, as first Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. Ben Franklin's high-level Masonic and intelligence connections are identified in the occult conspiracy cited by the Pyramid Gallery. Thomas Jefferson, a deist, wrote the Declaration of Independence, which opens with a statement of rights deriving not from God of Holy Scripture, but nature's God and the natural law. Quote, on February 4th, 1789, Washington was elected first president of the United States, John Adams as vice president. The inauguration was on April 30th. The oath was administered by Robert Livingston, Grand Master of New York's Grand Lodge. The marshal of the day, another Freemason, General Jacob Morton. Yet another Freemason, General Morgan Lewis, Washington's escort. Washington himself, at the time, was master of Alexandria Lodge number 22, Virginia. December 14th, Alexander Hamilton submitted proposals for establishing a national bank. Jefferson opposed them, but Washington signed them through. On the American dollar bill was printed the Great Seal of the United States. It is unmistakably Freemasonic. All-seeing eye in a triangle above a 13-stepped, four-sided pyramid, beneath which a scroll proclaims the advent of a new secular order, one of Freemasonry's long-standing dreams. For those of you that don't know, the eye above the pyramid is the Eye of Ra. Once again, deference to Marduk / Baal / Ra, god of Babylon. Continue. September 18, 1793. Cornerstone of the Capitol was officially laid. Grand Lodge of Maryland presided over the ceremony. Washington was asked to serve as master. Subsequently, the Capitol and the White House were each to become focal points of an elaborate geometry governing the layout of the nation's capital city. This geometry, originally devised by an architect named Pierre L'Enfant, was subsequently modified by Washington and Jefferson so as to produce specifically octagonal patterns, incorporation, and the particular cross used as a device by Masonic Templars. Curious piece of the Masonic puzzle is the actual street layout for our capital city, Washington, D.C. You see, the city was laid out in the form of the central Masonic symbols, the square, the compass, the rule, and the pentagram. The Washington Monument stands in perfect line to the intersecting point of the form of the Masonic square, stretching from the house of the Temple Libertas, to the Capitol building. Within the hypotenuse of that right triangle sits many of the headquarters buildings for the most powerful departments of government, such as the Justice Department, U.S. Senate, and the Internal Revenue Service. The cornerstones of all these buildings have been laid in Masonic ritual, dedicated to the demonic god of masonry, Jabulon. That is the god of Freemasonry. If you don't believe me, look it up. That is the secret name of the Masonic god, the lost word, according to what they say, learned in the ritual of the Royal Arch Degree. Jau is the Greek for Jehovah. Bull is a rendering of the name Baal. On is the Babylonian name of Osiris. So when the dollar bill says, "In God we trust," it is not the Most High God. It is a pagan god. So it's true, America has all the marks, but surely it's not Babylon. Let's take it a step further. Let's compare the prophecies of a 12th century saint about the United States to the punishments promised by God to Babylon in Revelation. Remember, this saint lived long before the construction of the United States. St Hildegard of Bingen, 12th century. Quote, "Before the comet comes, many nations, the good accepted, will be scoured with want and famine. The great nation in the ocean," that's the United States, "that is inhabited by people of different tribes and descents," once again, a nation of immigrants, "by an earthquake, storm, and tidal waves will be devastated. It will be divided, and in great part submerged. That nation will also have many misfortunes at sea, and lose its colonies in the east through a tiger and a lion." The comet, by its tremendous pressure, will force much out of the ocean and flood many countries, causing much want and many plagues. After the great comet, the great nation will be devastated by earthquakes, storms, and great waves of water, causing much want and plagues. The ocean will also flood many other countries, so that all coastal cities will live in fear, with many destroyed. All sea-coast cities will be fearful, and many of them will be destroyed by tidal waves, and most living creatures will be killed, and even those who escape will die from a horrible disease. For in none of these cities does a person live according to the laws of God. Peace will return to Europe when the white flower again takes possession of the throne of France. And that's material for a different talk, which is the Great Monarch, which we'll talk about in a different video. Okay, let's take a look at another saint's prophecy. Only this one lived in the 3rd century. Note the similarities between the two. These two prophecies are almost identical, although they were written in two different languages, and they were written about 1,000 years apart. This was St Hilarion of Czechoslovakia, born in Palestine, 291 AD. One day before the comet shines, there we have the comet again, a lot of people from need and misery will be wanting a home. Now we're talking about immigrants that are streaming to this nation. The great empire in the sea, who are different folk stock and origin, once again, nation of tribes and tongues, different races, will be devastated by earthquake, storm, and flood. Same punishments. This empire will suffer much misfortune from the sea. We have the destruction from the sea again. It will be divided into 2 islands, and part of it will sink. Once again, we have flooding again. The distant possession in the east will be lost through a tiger and a lion. Same thing. We have colonies in the east, only this one says that they are distant. So we're not talking about the east coast. We're probably talking about Puerto Rico, those islands, the U.S. territories in the east. It says they will be lost through a tiger and a lion. Does that mean that the tiger and lion will actually take control of these territories? Or will they actually be destroyed? I don't know. Now, let's compare the punishments in these 2 prophecies against the United States. And let's compare them to the punishments promised to the whore of Babylon in Revelation. We have losses at sea. Revelations 18. For in 1 hour are so great riches come to naught, every shipmaster, all that sail into the lake, mariners, as many as work in the sea, stood afar off, and cried, seeing the place of her burning, what city is like to this great city? And they that cast dust upon their heads and cried, weeping and mourning, saying, Alas, alas, that great city, wherein all were made rich, that had ships at sea by reason of her prices, for in 1 hour she is made desolate. So we're talking about a tremendous loss at sea. If you have the seaport sitting right on the sea, New York, that means any shipmaster who's doing their docking, doing their trading, has completely lost all of their products. They're at that port. And all trading that is done at that port, that is on the sea. Earthquake, Jeremiah 50. We have got some other verses here, 50, 46, 49, 21, and 51, 29. At the noise of the taking of Babylon, the earth is moved, and the cry is heard amongst the nations. Once again, the earth is moved at the noise of their fall. The cry of their voice is heard in the Red Sea. And the land shall be in a commotion, and shall be troubled. It's talking about the land. For the design of the Lord against Babylon shall awake, to make the land of Babylon desert and uninhabitable. The 2 prophecies both talk about disease. Okay, we have Jeremiah 51, verse 1. Thus saith the Lord, Behold, I will raise up, as it were, a pestilential wind, that's plague, against Babylon, and against inhabitants thereof, who have lifted up their heart against me. Okay, now we have flooding. Revelations 18:21. Mighty angel took up a stone, as it were, a great millstone, cast it into the sea, saying, With such violence as this shall Babylon, that great city, be thrown down. Such shall be found no more at all. Even more obvious. Jeremiah 51:42. The sea is come up over Babylon. She is covered with the multitude of the waves thereof. We also have famine and invasion. Jeremiah 13:5. I will send among them the sword and the famine and the pestilence, till they be consumed out of the land which I gave to them and their fathers. Jeremiah 50. For behold, I raise up, will bring against Babylon an assembly of great nations from the land of the north. They shall be prepared against her. From thence she shall be taken. Their arrows like those of a mighty man. A destroyer shall not return in vain. So there is another prophecy. Unfortunately, I don't have the quote of it here, which states that the proud nation will be divided. It says the proud nation, and it also says the new world. It says they will be divided one against another, so we'll talk about civil war. And then it talks about them being taken into captivity. That corresponds also with the great whore, because in Babylon, all the references talk about not only being attacked by a nation from the north, but also talks about the people being taken into captivity. And it specifically uses the term the New World, which we know is in reference to America. So in closing, the only entity that exists today that has all the signs of the Whore of Babylon is the United States. Not only that, but the prophesied punishments of the United States correspond, even more than ancient Rome, to the punishments prophesied for the Whore of Babylon. So in closing, is the United States the Whore of Babylon? In God's eyes, yes. Absolutely yes. And it will be destroyed just as assuredly as ancient Babylon and ancient Rome, from whom it descends, were decimated before the power of the Most High God. Is it the end times Babylon that will rise along the Antichrist? That will be discussed in a different segment. However, the United States will not be around to see it. So I will repeat, Jeremiah 51. Flee from Babylon. Escape with your lives. Do not be destroyed in her punishment, for this is the time of the Lord's vengeance. He will pay her what she deserves. For if you will not heed the warning to escape with your lives, you must at least escape with your soul. Turn away from the false gods of success, freedom to do as you will, liberty, entertainment, and pleasure, for such are the sorceries which captivate the souls of the men of the earth. For to follow Christ, in Jesus' words, then Jesus said to his disciples, if any man will come after me, let him deny himself, take up his cross, and follow me. For he that will save his life shall lose it. And he that shall lose his life for my sake shall find it. For what doth it profit a man, if he gain the whole world, and suffer the loss of his own soul? Or what exchange shall a man give for his soul? Brothers and sisters, thank you for your time. I respectfully ask that you get down on your knees, pray to God, ask him what his will is, ask him. Trust that if you leave Babylon, God will guard you. It says that also in the scriptures. It says, have no fear if you see violence on your right and your left. This is in reference to the other countries that those who flee Babylon are going to. It is better to live in the hands of God in a foreign land than to live with the whore of Babylon and place your trust on her sustenance. Thank you for your time, brothers and sisters. May God bless. I'll pray for you. Please pray for me. If you would like more information on the great monarch, the Antichrist, the Catholic Church's role according to a prophecy, and today's times, World War III and what is coming next according to prophecies by mystics. There's over 30 of them that talk about what is happening today and what will happen next. We will have other videos later. Have a wonderful day. Thank you for your time. May the Lord bless you.